My name's Alex. I'm 29. I've always been the quiet one in my family, the listener, the fixer, the afterthought. I never made a fuss, never asked for much, never stirred the pot. Growing up, my parents praised my older brother, Jeremy, like he walked on water. Firstborn, honor student, football star, the whole golden child checklist. Meanwhile, I was just there. Not unloved exactly, but always in the background. The one who got hand-me-downs, who was told, we'll talk later, and maybe next time. I learned early on not to expect much, and to be honest, I was fine with that. I liked my space. I liked earning things on my own, which is why this story still messes with my head. 2 weeks ago, I had my engagement party. It was this modest rooftop thing in Brooklyn, rented space, string lights, cheap wine, good people. My fiancée, Nora, wanted something small and intimate. No giant reception hall, no look at us spectacle. Just close friends, some cousins, a few of Nora's coworkers, and immediate family. I was nervous all day, not because of the party itself, but because of the people in it. More specifically, my parents and Jeremy. They hadn't been thrilled about the engagement. My mom called it sudden. My dad asked if I was sure. Jeremy, naturally, made a joke about how it only took me a decade to find someone who could stand me, which he said in front of everyone at brunch 2 days after I proposed. It was just his way, cruel under the guise of humor. But that's not the part that matters. The real story starts at the party. Right around 8:15 p.m., Grandpa Joe had been quiet all evening. He's 82, sharp as a tack, and absolutely no filter. The man once told my cousin's girlfriend her dress looked like a curtain. But he loved me. Always had. Said I reminded him of himself, the one nobody thought would amount to much until he did. When I was 13, he taught me how to play chess and said, "You're not loud like your brother." That's a good thing. Loud people think noise equals power. Quiet ones wait for their move. So when he stood up with a glass of champagne and clinked it for attention, I expected a sweet toast, something mildly inappropriate, maybe a joke about grandkids. Instead, he smiled wide and said, "I'm just happy you're finally enjoying the Manhattan penthouse I put in your name." I blinked. Everyone around us blinked. Even Nora, who'd never met Grandpa before that night, turned to me slowly like she misheard. I laughed, because it had to be a joke, right? I'd never even been in a penthouse. And then I saw Grandpa's smile falter. He tilted his head. "Wait, what penthouse?" I said, half laughing. Silence. Grandpa's brows drew together. "The one on 76th, top floor. I signed it over to you 6 years ago, when you graduated. Your dad said it'd be easier if he handled the paperwork and taxes for now. Said you'd move in when you were ready." I stared at him. My chest felt hollow. My ears rang. "Wait, wait, wait," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're serious?" Grandpa looked around the room like something was off. "Of course I'm serious. You never got the keys." Nora reached for my arm. And that's when I looked at them, my parents. Jeremy, white as ghosts. My mom had frozen mid-sip of wine. My dad was rubbing the side of his neck like it suddenly itched. Jeremy wasn't even trying to hide it. He had this half-panic, half-smug expression like a magician caught mid-trick. I didn't say a word. I just stared. Grandpa looked between us. "Alex," he said slowly, "you've never been to the place?" "No," I said, quieter now. I didn't even know it existed. Then the room erupted. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no fists slammed on tables. It was worse than that. It was the kind of quiet where everyone hears everything. My aunt from Jersey muttered, "Oh my God," under her breath. Nora's coworker whispered something to her husband and shot a glance toward Jeremy. I could feel my face heating up. Not from embarrassment, from a kind of confusion that felt like betrayal wrapped in fire. You know that moment when a puzzle piece clicks into place, and suddenly the whole picture changes? That was what this felt like. Except the picture was my family. My dad cleared his throat. "Joe, maybe now's not the time." "No," Grandpa interrupted, shaking his head. "Now's exactly the time." "What's going on?" My mom stepped forward. "Dad, we didn't want to overwhelm Alex. He was in grad school. He was already so stressed. You said yourself." "I said he'd grow into it, not that you should hide it from him." Jeremy jumped in. "Look, it's not a big deal. It's not like anyone's living there." That was a lie, and I knew it the second he said it. My brother had posted a photo on Instagram 6 months ago, a skyline view I'd never seen before, captioned "Best Seat in the City." At the time, I figured it was a hotel or something. But now, I saw it clear as day. He'd been living there, in the place Grandpa gave to me. I didn't react. I just looked at him. And for once, Jeremy had no smirk, no clever comment. Just that same frozen, cornered look. Grandpa looked at me, then at them. His voice cracked slightly when he said, "Alex, I'm sorry. I should have handled it directly." "You trusted them," I said. "So did I." There wasn't much more said after that. Not out loud anyway. People filtered back to the bar. Conversations resumed, or tried to. Nora held my hand under the table. Grandpa sat down slowly, like the air had gone out of him. My parents didn't leave, but they didn't stay long either. They gave a half-hearted goodbye and promised we'd talk tomorrow. Jeremy left before dessert, claiming a headache. I didn't sleep that night. Nora did. Eventually, but I stayed on the couch, phone in hand, scrolling back years through family photos, texts, emails, searching for signs I'd missed. Clues. And they were all there. The evasive responses. The sudden vacations. The times I'd asked to crash at Jeremy's friend's place in the city, and he'd said it was being renovated. I never thought to question it. Why would I? They were my family. The next morning, I called Grandpa, asked if he still had the paperwork. He did. And that's when the real story began. I met Grandpa at his apartment the next morning. He was already waiting when I buzzed in, standing by the window in his wool cardigan, holding a manila folder like it weighed 1,000 pounds. He didn't say much at first, just gave me this look, part guilty, part angry, but mostly tired. Like a man who'd spent years thinking something was in good hands, only to find it pawned behind his back. He handed me the folder and said, "I trusted them because they were loud. But you? You're the one who listens." Inside the folder were scanned copies of the deed transfer, notarized documents, tax forms, all signed. All legal. My name, in clear bold letters, right there on the title. Property owner, Alexander J. Morrison. And then another paper, a note from Grandpa's lawyer dated 6 years ago. As discussed, title of the property located at, address redacted, has been transferred to Mr. Alexander Morrison. Custodianship for insurance and property tax management will be temporarily granted to Mr. Thomas Morrison until Alex is notified or turns 25. I was 23 at the time. I'm 29 now. 6 years. 6 years they said nothing. 6 years they let me take out loans for grad school while they paid Jeremy's rent with my penthouse. And not once, did they say, "By the way, there's a place with your name on it." Grandpa poured me coffee. Black, no sugar, like he always made it. "I asked your father 3 times if you liked the view," he said, lowering himself into the armchair. "He said you were grateful. Said you'd written a thank you card. I never got one, but I figured it got lost. He was always the organized one." I didn't know what to say. My throat was dry, my hands trembling as I stared down at my own name, wondering how it was possible to own something and have absolutely no idea. "So," Grandpa said, looking at me, "what are you going to do?" I didn't answer right away. I thought about Nora, about the one-bedroom walk-up we'd been scraping rent for every month, about the student loan reminders I'd gotten last week, about the nights I stayed up late freelancing while Jeremy was sipping wine on a private terrace that should have been mine. "I don't know," I said finally, "but they're not going to like it." The next few days were surreal. I didn't bring it up to my parents. Not right away. I wanted time to breathe, to think, to plan. Nora was furious when I told her, but she was careful not to push. "This isn't just about the apartment," she said. "It's about what else they might have taken from you." She was right. So I made a list, literally. I opened my notes app and started listing things over the years that hadn't added up. The way Jeremy always had new gadgets and travel stories despite working the same entry-level job for 4 years. The way Dad once mentioned tax headaches out of nowhere. The year Mom told me the family was stretched thin when I asked for help covering my books, only for Jeremy to post pictures from a trip to Rome a week later. I requested a property access record from the building. Grandpa gave me the lawyer's contact, and with a few polite but pointed emails, I had everything. My name was still on the deed. Jeremy was not listed as a tenant. But security logs? Yeah, his key card had been active since 2018. He'd even added a guest, his girlfriend, who I didn't even know he was still dating. I drove by the building once. Didn't go inside. Just parked across the street and looked up at it. 17 stories of polished glass and old money. And somewhere up top, a view I was supposed to enjoy, a view I had paid taxes on without knowing. And still, I hadn't told them. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for. Maybe I wanted to see if they'd come clean on their own. Maybe I wanted to give them one last chance, some glimmer of hope that they'd say, "We're sorry, Alex. We were wrong." But that moment never came. Instead, I got a call from Jeremy. "Hey," he said too casually. "Just checking in. You good?" I didn't say anything. "About Grandpa's little moment," he continued, chuckling. "I think he got confused. He's been mixing things up a lot lately, you know? He probably meant to say he thought about putting it in your name." I let the silence stretch. Jeremy coughed. "Anyway, just didn't want you getting the wrong idea or anything. It's not like there's some hidden treasure waiting for you, or whatever." He was lying. And he knew that I knew. "Jeremy," I said, my voice calm. "How long have you been living there?" Pause. "Then, what are you talking about?" "In the penthouse." "How long?" Another pause. Then the click of the line going dead. That was it. No excuse, no denial. Just panic. So I made my move. The next morning, I contacted Grandpa's lawyer and scheduled a formal revocation of custodianship, stripping my father of any further rights to act on my behalf regarding the property. I filed for a keycard reset with the building's management. Security was instructed to revoke Jeremy's access. His girlfriend's too. I scheduled a locksmith for the door, new codes, new keys. I'd never even seen the inside of that place, but I was taking it back, inch by inch. Still, I hadn't said a word to them. Until the following Sunday. Family brunch. We hadn't done one in months, but Mom insisted on hosting after the weird energy at the party. She wanted to clear the air, which in our family usually meant everyone acting like nothing happened while she pretended to care about your feelings. The table was set with her usual obsession: cloth napkins, fancy juice glasses, overpriced pastries no one liked. Dad was already sipping coffee when I arrived. Jeremy wasn't there yet. Grandpa wasn't invited. I walked in carrying nothing. No flowers, no smiles. Just the folder. Mom hugged me like nothing had happened. "Alex, sweetie, you look thin. Are you eating?" "I'm fine." I sat down at the far end of the table, not the seat I usually took. I wanted space. I needed them all in front of me. "So," Dad said, folding his hands, "have you had a chance to process what your grandfather said? We just wanted to make sure you're not taking anything too literally. You know how he gets." I opened the folder, placed it in the center of the table. Mom went pale the moment she saw the header. Dad leaned forward, reading the bold text. Jeremy walked in just in time to see the final page, the one with the security log, time-stamped with his name. No one spoke. Not yet. Because they knew. And I hadn't even started talking. Jeremy stood frozen in the doorway, keys still dangling from his hand. He looked at the open folder on the table like it was a ticking bomb. Mom glanced at him, then back at me, then at Dad, as if trying to telepathically coordinate some kind of excuse. But it was too late for that. The air was so thick with tension, I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator in the next room. I leaned back in my chair and folded my hands, mirroring Dad's earlier pose, but with none of the calm. "So," I said quietly, "you all knew." No one answered. Jeremy finally closed the door behind him and stepped into the dining room like he was approaching a firing squad. "It's not what you think." "Really?" I cut in, sharper than I meant. "Because what I think is that Grandpa put a penthouse in my name 6 years ago. What I think is that Dad was listed as custodian, and I was never told. What I think is that you've been living there for the past 4 years, rent-free, while I work nights to pay off tuition." I locked eyes with Mom. "Did you know?" She blinked quickly. "Alex, honey, we didn't want to burden you with." "Burden me?" I said, my voice rising. "You mean letting me live in the place I own would have been too stressful?" Dad's voice was low, trying to be measured. "You don't understand the full picture. The taxes were complicated. There were assessments, HOA fees, insurance. You weren't ready to deal with all that when you were in school. We were managing it until you were more stable." "And Jeremy?" I said. "Was he managing it too?" Jeremy scoffed. "Come on, man. You weren't using it. What difference does it make?" I turned to him slowly. "You stole it." "Legally," he began, but I slammed my hand down on the table, making the juice glasses rattle. "Legally, it's mine. My name. My property. And you lived there, claimed it, posted pictures of it, while I scraped together rent on a place with no heat in the winter." Jeremy's jaw flexed, but he didn't say anything. That smug mask he always wore had started to crack. He looked more like a kid who got caught cheating on a test than the confident, self-appointed golden child he usually was. "You've been living in my shadow your whole life," he said finally. "This was the one thing I had." My breath caught. "The one thing you had. Your grandpa's favorite. Everyone knows it. He never trusted me with anything." "That's because you lie, Jeremy. You take and lie and smile while you do it." Dad stood up then, both palms out. "Let's all just calm down. We're family. This doesn't need to turn into something ugly." "It already is ugly," I said. "And it's been that way for years." I looked at him, really looked at him, and I realized something. I didn't trust them anymore. Not a single one of them. The old stories they told me about how we all made sacrifices so Jeremy could attend that out-of-state program? Suddenly suspicious. The time they claimed their savings were tight, right before I took out another loan? Suspicious. The years of being told to be grateful, to not ask for too much, to help keep the peace. All of it, twisted. "I've revoked custodianship," I said. "You have no rights to the property anymore. Your key cards are deactivated. I'm changing the locks this week. Jeremy, if you have anything in there, you've got until Friday." Mom's mouth opened in shock. "You can't do this." "Why not?" I said. "You all did." She tried to soften her voice, switching tactics. "Alex, please. Don't let one misunderstanding ruin the family. We've always supported you." "You supported me?" I said, almost laughing. "By hiding a multi-million-dollar property from me? By letting your favorite son play house with something that didn't belong to him?" "Your brother was going through a tough time," she said desperately. "You were doing well. You didn't need it as much as he did." That sentence, more than anything else, made something inside me go quiet. That was it. That was the truth. In their eyes, I'd always been the one who didn't need anything. Because I didn't complain. Because I didn't shout. Because I didn't threaten to cut them off. And they'd taken full advantage of that. I stood slowly. The chair scraped loudly against the tile. "I'm done," I said. "You don't get to make me feel guilty for taking back what's mine. You don't get to spin this into some family misunderstanding. You lied. You used me. And I'm not going to pretend that's okay just because you raised me." Jeremy looked at me like he wanted to say something. An apology, maybe, or another excuse. But in the end, he stayed silent. I turned to leave. "Where are you going?" Mom called after me. "To see my penthouse," I said without turning back. For the first time. And I walked out the door. As soon as I got to the car, I let out a long breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My hands were shaking as I started the engine. The silence in that moment wasn't peaceful, it was charged. I didn't feel victorious. Not yet. I felt hollow. Like I'd finally seen something I could never unsee. The drive to Manhattan was a blur. I barely remember the traffic, the lights, the turns. I just remember pulling up to the building, showing my ID to the front desk, and being handed a new key card with a quiet, "Welcome home, Mr. Morrison." The elevator ride to the top floor was excruciatingly slow. Every floor ding sounded like a drumbeat in my chest. When the doors finally opened, I stepped out into a hallway of quiet elegance. Warm lighting, marble floors, clean lines. I held my breath as I unlocked the door. I pushed it open slowly, and what I saw made me stop in my tracks. Because Jeremy hadn't moved out yet, but someone else had just arrived, and they were standing in the middle of the living room, holding something that didn't belong to them. The person standing in the penthouse wasn't Jeremy. It was his girlfriend, Emma, or ex-girlfriend, I should say. She froze when she saw me, a folded shirt clutched in one hand, a duffel bag at her feet. The look on her face wasn't defiance or panic. It was exhaustion. "Oh," she said softly. "You're Alex." I nodded, still in the doorway. I didn't say anything. I think I was waiting for her to lunge for a lamp or start screaming or accuse me of breaking in. But instead, she just let out a breath like she'd been holding it for 6 years. "I'm sorry," she said. That threw me off. Of all the things I'd braced myself for, confrontation, awkward small talk, a standoff, I hadn't expected an apology. "I didn't know," she said, her voice low. "Not at first. He told me it was his. That his grandfather left it to him. I didn't question it. Why would I? Then I saw a letter with your name. A legal notice from the HOA. Last year, when I asked, he said you were his cousin who'd moved overseas. That it was complicated. That he was taking care of it. I just..." She trailed off and looked around the space like she couldn't quite believe she was still there. "I found the truth a few months ago. Started seeing the cracks. Started seeing him for who he really was. I stepped inside and shut the door behind me. The lock clicked quietly. You don't have to explain anything, I said. Not if you're leaving. She gave a small, embarrassed smile. I'm not here to defend him. I'm here because I wanted to be gone before you got here. I just didn't move fast enough. She gestured to the duffel bag. I only have a few things left. I stood there, unsure what to feel. I hated Jeremy for what he did, but I didn't hate her. Not when she looked like she'd been hurt, too. And in some small, ironic way, she was the only one who'd actually acknowledged me since all of this started. Take your time, I said finally. I'm not here to throw anyone out. She nodded and moved quickly, packing the last of her things. I watched her slip a folded photo off the fridge, the two of them, smiling with wine glasses in hand on the balcony. She hesitated for a second, then ripped it clean down the middle and tossed it into the trash. Before she left, she turned to me again. He used to brag about how everyone always believed him, how even his family thought he could do no wrong. Yeah, I said. I know. I hope you make this place yours, she said. Not his. Yours. Then she was gone. I was alone in the penthouse. It didn't feel like mine yet. The furniture was sleek and modern, Jeremy's taste, not mine. The fridge was stocked with things I didn't eat. A basketball signed by some Knicks player I couldn't name sat on a shelf I wouldn't have installed. But slowly, I started to walk around, taking it in, letting my own breath echo in the open, high-ceilinged space. I stepped onto the balcony. The city spread out below me like a living painting. Skyscrapers, yellow taxis, the river in the distance catching the sunset. I felt something tighten in my chest, and for a second, I couldn't tell if it was rage or sadness. Maybe both. This had been mine all along, and they'd taken it. I spent the next few days clearing the place out. The management team helped with the heavy lifting, furniture, old boxes, even Jeremy's old sneakers he'd carelessly left by the front door. Every time I opened a drawer, I found more remnants of his life pretending to be mine. I replaced the locks, reset the thermostat, changed the Wi-Fi password, and had the nameplate at the entrance changed to mine. I had no idea what I wanted to do with the space long-term, live in it, rent it, sell it, but for now, I needed it to be empty. Clean. Mine. 3 days later, I got an email from my mother. Subject: Family. Alex. We're all heartbroken over how things unfolded. Your father and I never intended for this to happen. Jeremy made a mistake, a big one, but we're still a family. Please don't shut us out. Can we meet and talk this through? Love. Mom. I didn't reply. Then a text from Jeremy. Bro, okay. I messed up. But you can't just throw me out like that. I needed that place. And you're seriously going to let her stay longer than me? You think that makes you better? I blocked the number. I wasn't interested in reconciliation. Not yet. Maybe not ever. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one trying to keep the peace. I wasn't swallowing my anger or sacrificing my comfort so they could avoid guilt. A week later, Grandpa came by. He stood in the penthouse doorway for a moment, looking around, nodding. Then he stepped inside and walked straight to the balcony. Better than I remembered, he said. God, that view. I joined him outside. The city lights had started to flicker on. He looked at me, eyes shining. You handled it better than I would have, he said. If I were you, I might have burned the place down. I chuckled, but it didn't quite reach my chest. He put a hand on my shoulder. You always had the longer fuse. Doesn't mean you can't explode when the time comes. I didn't want to, I said. I just couldn't stay quiet anymore. He nodded, understanding. You didn't explode, Alex. You reclaimed. We stood there in silence for a while, watching the sun vanish between buildings. Before he left, he turned to me and said, Your father called. Tried to make it sound like you were overreacting. Said you're punishing them. And what did you say? He smiled. I told him if you were really trying to punish them, you'd have called a lawyer. I raised my eyebrows. You think I should? He shrugged. Not for revenge, but for closure. It took me another month to make the decision. I hired a lawyer. Not to sue them for damages, though I easily could have, but to conduct a full audit of the years my father had been acting as custodian. Tax filings, insurance payments, maintenance costs, any withdrawals or reimbursements made in my name. The lawyer came back with a 17-page report. Over the course of 5 years, more than $160,000 had been redirected, repairs that were never done, property tax payments filed under their joint accounts, even a few rental agreements with temporary tenants listed under aliases. My parents had been siphoning money from the property while Jeremy lived in it. My lawyer called it what it was: fraud. I filed a formal complaint and presented the evidence to the condo association and the city. They launched their own investigation. I didn't press criminal charges, though I could have, but I made sure the complaint would stay on record. Then I sent them all one final letter. To my family: you stole from me. You lied to me. And you expected me to thank you for it. I won't pretend to understand why, whether it was favoritism, pride, or just plain entitlement. But I do understand one thing: you don't get to be part of my life unless you respect me. The penthouse is mine. Always was. You abused your role, broke my trust, and used me. There's nothing left for us to talk through. If you contact me again about this matter, my lawyer will respond. Otherwise, I suggest you take a long look at yourselves and ask how you ended up losing the son you never truly saw. Alex. They never replied. Not once. I heard through a cousin that Jeremy had to move in with my parents, a cramped two-bedroom in the suburbs. My dad took an early retirement. My mom's bridge club asked fewer questions after the letter went public. As for me, I kept the penthouse. Not forever, just long enough to repaint the walls, replace the furniture, breathe air that didn't feel like someone else's lie. Then Nora and I sold it. We used the money to pay off my student loans, her medical school tuition, and buy a modest brownstone in Brooklyn with space for an office, a garden, and maybe, someday, a kid. People say money can't buy peace. But I disagree. Sometimes, peace is finally knowing you're not the backup plan, the forgotten one, or the safe choice. You're the one who made it through, even if you had to burn the bridge behind you to do it.